Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm joined by sports psychologist Dr. Peter Schneider. Peter, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm great. So excited to have you on. Really excited to unpack your experiences as a sports psychologist at the coalface. You've got some real rich experience working in high performance soccer, football. Before we do that, let's get to know you, Peter. Tell us about yourself.
Okay. I think to myself, one of the most things I always like to start with is that my name is Peter Schneider, which is one of the most German names that you could have. Although I was born and raised in around Detroit, Michigan, in the United States, so I grew up calling it soccer as well.
Yep.
I've been here for almost 20 years. I've not quite converted. When I talk to American friends, I still use soccer, but with with the British lots, I have converted at least to say football, so we're on the same page. I've been, like I said, overseas for 20 years. Most of the time in Germany. I did my master's in Finland, which was wonderful, in sports psychology. I did a second one in Leipzig because I spoke the German language. I had it in high school. It's actually also not something from family. It's a complete
Wow.
random fact about me. But and then started a doctor PhD there as well, and kind of then went really small. Went to a fourth league club close by with their academy. Got through. Got through up to work with the men's team for a bit with the U19 coach. Went up to the men's team. He asked if I wanted to try, and had a great deal of success. Just kind of worked out a lot of things. Some of it's luck, obviously. You have a good team. Some of it's just good coaching, good management, and hopefully a little good psychology. And we were able to get promoted.
Nice.
And then I went down to Augsburg after a few years, working with their academy and kind of then scratching the surface of the professional team when I got the call from RB Leipzig if I would be interested to join the mid-season. They had kind of struggled that season. That was under Jesse Marsch, and I just missed him. He was unfortunately sacked before I got there as an American.
What year was that, Peter?
What year?
What year was that?
That was 2020. So I came January 2022.
Gotcha.
Jesse Marsch was 21. He started, and so there was a lot of changes in the whole club. And yeah, that's basically the short version of my vita. I'll spare you the personal life details, but at least those things to my background. Yeah.
Well, talking about personal, I mean, I'd love to back up a little bit. I mean, why sports psychology? You said you came from Detroit, Michigan. You went over, you did a master's degree in Finland. I'd like to explore that a little bit before we go into the detail about Leipzig, which I'm so excited to unpack. But, reverse up for me. Why sports psychology? Why did you go over to Finland to study sports psychology? Did you play yourself? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I was a massive competitor. I have two older brothers. I just enjoy competing.
Right.
If esports would have been maybe bigger, I probably would have gone that route. I would be very honest. I was very good at video games. Probably played too many of them, but I was a decent soccer player. My biggest weapon though was my mentality. It wasn't. I talked to some from professionals or talked to some practitioners who say I was a great player, but my mind just wasn't really capable. I was kind of the opposite. I was actually quite mentally one of the better players. I was usually captain of my team.
Okay.
I really understood a lot about team energy, synergy. I understood a lot about how to make a team better than its actual, let's say, technical capabilities. I was very good at that, at kind of the motivational aspects. I was in theater as well, which I think sometimes you have some good transition. People don't understand this, but some really good transitions between theater and performance and in sport.
Completely agree.
And so I was just, I actually just did springboard diving almost just out of boredom because I just thought it was really great. It was fun. I just thought it was I like challenges. And sports psychology, I got to college and I really performed so well in so many things. And I got to college in the States and I had a coach that just kind of sucked the air out of the room. And I just felt to myself, how do you deal? And I talk myself being a mentally strong person. I felt like I was doing all the things, checking all the boxes, doing what I needed to do, and it just wasn't really successful. And I had studied psychology in my undergrad, and I had done a semester abroad in Bonn, in Germany, in West Germany there, and I had met someone from Finland. And she once asked, "Hey, do you want to come? Do you want to come see Finland?" And I went up, and those who are from Michigan will probably laugh, specifically northern Michigan. It's not too different looking, actually. It's very flat. It's all lakes. It's very cold in winter. It's very
Yes.
dark in winter,
Oh, yes.
and it's very warm in summer. And the people, of course, are they're very own type of person. Let's put it that way. And so this was something I was able to relate to, and I kind of just poked around the university. It was Jyväskylä. It was in the center of Finland, so not Helsinki, about 4 hours north. And I said, you know what? They just started this European master's program of sports psychology. Why not? Really cool idea. I'm going to jump into that. And so I had always been interested in this kind of these topics, got caught up in it, really liked it. Um, got kind of continued on. I was able to go to Leipzig where I could at least speak the language, and so I kind of then just it's this silly process of one step after the other. Just kind of the idea presents itself to you, and I think again maybe more interesting to others is to say that Finland was a very very difficult time for me. Probably one of the best things about Finland is that you spend a lot of time by yourself, in saunas for sure is one of the big things, and you just kind of learn to be with your thoughts.
Mhm.
And as a young 20 something with his own existential crises going on and lots of time in the sauna, you do a lot of self reflection about what you want to do, what's important to you. You just meditate on a lot of life things, a lot of life philosophies, and so yeah, that pushed me in a really clear direction about what kind of psychologist I want to be, that I was really interested in taking this next step and trying to work with really high performance athletes, maybe those who had the capabilities I didn't have, but maybe I could show them one or two things um, that I felt I was world class at, that I was really good at.
I'm going to ask you a ridiculous question now, but I
Go
do
ahead.
need to ask you this because you're in Finland, and one of the most prominent sports psychologists of all time is Finnish, and that's Juri Hannen,
Mm-hmm.
Professor Juri Hannen. Did you
Mm-hmm.
stumble across Professor Hannen at all?
Once he was basically the mentor of one of our professors there, Montse Cruz there, and so eyes, this eyes off and everything
Individual
that
sandbox malfunctioning for everyone
the
listening in.
oh yeah, well, but yeah, I mean, just fascinating, kind of when you first hear about it and you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But we shook hands once. Um, and he gave a presentation. It was very very cool to be there. Kind of this person that anyone who's involved with psychology or sports psychology is going to know who this person is. I've had those few moments in my life where I've met one of these big names that you kind of shake hands with, Dan Gould or something like that in the States. Ken Rivers I never met. I was always trying to somehow bump into him. But yeah, that was definitely an individual who. He could have said anything in those half hour that he was standing there. I would have, just ate it up.
Well, just listening to what you said there, did you say Montse Ruiz was a professor at your
Yes,
school?
yeah, yeah.
Wow, yeah. I mean, incredible work around feeling states and emotional states,
Mm,
right? Brilliant.
absolutely.
Absolutely incredible. We've had Bernadette Kellerman, who's probably now Dr. Bernadette Kellerman, doing a PhD at Edinburgh. She's been on the show a couple of times. She's been utilising Professor Ruiz's models and theories. So, absolutely fascinating area.
Mm.
You moved on to a PhD. Just again, what was your PhD in?
My PhD is focused around talent development environments. So I looked a lot at
Yep.
Henriksen's work in Denmark. Team
Yeah.
Denmark was kind of a big during my time in Finland, and moreover when I moved to Leipzig. I just kind of, as I said, I was someone who just was really into team synergy, team environments. I was really again so interested about maybe why at my one environment I was able to flourish, I felt so comfortable, and at a different one I did so poorly at. And so Christopher Henriksen was a really big influence on me in those years in the early 2010s. Tim Denmark just really blew me away in a lot of things that they
Yeah.
brought out in terms of literature and self-reflection, and personally paved the way for, I think, for a lot of European practitioners. Uh, Obviously, those who are working with ACT, no doubt of the mindfulness for sure, but also who just like to take an environmental approach. I know they've had great stuff, great success as well, and so. yeah, I just kind of got caught on that train. I thought it was very interesting. I was curious how it might work. What I thought was cool that my PhD was basically they were looking at high performance environments, and I said, can this work in recreational environments? Because if we can continue to keep people active so they stick in their clubs, and so Germany has this huge club system where you are in all these different, whether it's soccer or whether it's swimming or whatever, but specifically young men and women more than anything, quit at
Mhm.
around 16, 17 years old for a variety of reasons. And I thought to myself, maybe their theories can actually fit to the modern population, or to the greater population, and really help people stay active as opposed to dropping out at these ages. So that was my PhD, and for me personally, I actually looked at it more in applying it to then high performance environments. I knew that was more the direction I was going. At the same time, I felt like the research would then at least add maybe more to the general population than simply something that only a handful of people who are competing at the Olympics or whatnot could do. That was my thought process. How can I maybe do both? I can gain from this, and the general population could eventually also gain from this.
Well, talking about high performance environments, you stepped into that first gig in the fourth
Mm,
division, and had a successful season. The team got promoted, and as we always say in sports psychology, we always have a small but important
mm.
contribution, I think, to success. Um, when you reflect back, for those listening in, what do you think you contributed to that environment, that you felt went well for you and was a positive contributor to the team?
I think the number one thing is structure.
Interesting.
Structure in terms of communication, structure in terms of goal setting, structure in terms of um, not just rehabilitation but recovery. So we had certain rules and certain values that we were really clear in setting. For example, if we won a match, it was 2 days off on recovery. And it was both this reward structure, which the players really enjoyed, and at the same time, it was we're pushing towards a greater recovery for every single time we set a mini goal, which is maybe to win on the weekend. But we met at the beginning of each 6 games or so. We had a block of 6 games, and we said, how many points can we get out of these games? Set a number, and then see how it went. And then we had also a small little prize, but it was much more about team building. It was like go kart riding or go golfing or something silly like this, and it just kind of had this positive feedback loop on it the whole time, where you had these 5 6 weeks, and I would meet with the team without the coaches, and we would set the goal and we debate it. And then we had a few different times. I remember the coach said, maybe they'll look at you and they'll say, what are we going to talk to you for? I said, then that's on me. That's my job. And so this is again where when I talk to psychologists, they say, um, you have to, if you want to work in that high performance environment, you have to prove yourself. You have to show your competency. You have to go into the locker room. And this, was a fourth league team. They clearly could have thought, what am I doing here? At the same time, I think I have to be honest. I think that locker room was probably the most difficult when I compare it to the two Bundesliga clubs I worked at. Um, there was a lot more kind of skepticism, where they're just like not really willing to maybe go with this. We're on the edge of professionalism, right? Very, very edge of professionalism, and it's not even so. You would think they would be more thankful that they have maybe an expert in this field, but it's much more different, right? And so I think that word structure is probably the greatest thing that I did. I think all the other things when it comes to performance anxiety with certain individuals, I think those help at the end. I think when it came to the promotion, so in order to get promoted, you have to be first in your league, and then you play a 2 game playoff against another team. And I was probably one of the biggest voices in terms of how should we sleep, how should we recover. I also have a little sports science background, so it helps. But I focused on, the period between the 2 games for me is what I can control. Literally during the match, I have very little influence. Those are players, coaches that have the influence. But it's how do we frame these matches going into them, And then quickly, how do we in 3 days recover as much as possible so that in the middle of, I think it was June 1st or 2nd was the game, in this heat, how are we going to be able to then perform the second 90 minutes better than them just from a physical point of view? Because you can be as mentally strong as you want if the body just gives out. It's and these players aren't used to these 3 to 4 day, turnarounds in the fourth league. It's not Champions League. It's not Euro League. They don't have that. So I think those are things that I was really able to be successful in that season.
And that sounds like it was very much at the team level, the group level, more
Mm.
so at the individual level, which isn't to suggest you were. I mean, you've mentioned you were doing some work at the individual level, but you felt that the most impactful from a systemic perspective was more what I might describe as the meso level rather than a micro level. It was at that team level. That's what I'm hearing you say there. And just a quick question as well, honing in on that notion of we set some rules or values, if you like. If we win, we have a couple of days recovery. Was that met with any kind of resistance or even just some basic dissonance from the coaches? How comfortable were they with that notion?
Coaches loved it. We actually got the idea. I think we stole the idea, if I recall, from Leicester City. I think
Okay.
Leicester City did this in the year they. I think when they're able to, they weren't always able to 2 days off. And I'm pretty sure I read this in the newspaper online somewhere about this, and I thought that's a brilliant idea, especially for the regional league where you have fourth league where you have a lot more time between games.
Mm-hmm.
I said we should do that. It's like just what a message at the beginning of the season that says, hey, we know what you boys value more than anything, and that's time off because you have so little of it during the season. So you can earn it. You can, and the thing is, what I like about it is you can always earn it. So you could have 2, 3 bad games, and then you could win it, and then you get it back, and that kind of helps you. So one of the biggest things that I preach continuously is how do I get a reset, whether we win or lose? How do I get a reset so that I'm back to focus for the next match as quickly as possible? And this is one of the ways to do it. And in this scenario, it was one of the, I think, one of the most effective ways to really build a really quick kind of a reward system within the team that they had complete control over, more or less. They were one of the favorites in the league. They knew they were one of the better teams in the league. They knew that they showed up on the weekend. They were likely to win if they were well focused. If not, then obviously you can always have you can always have a upset.
I was going to ask you because as you're speaking there, it makes me think. It's set against the backdrop of the motivational climate. Do you think the challenge of what you're describing can be that players might orient towards that kind of performance or ego focus, gotta win, gotta win, gotta win in simple terms, and take them away from the process? What you're saying is it actually had a positive impact and a healthy impact, and it turned down the volume of stress.
Right, right, right. Those are the thing is, whether or not you acknowledge the pressure, it's there, right? The winning
Of
pressure.
course.
So this is kind of one of the, when I talk to, say, theorists, it sounds harsh in a way, but I talk to those who let's say aren't actually working in environments. I'm very direct about this. I say whether or not you want to say that the pressure to win is there or not, it's
Yes.
there. And in any club I've been in, academy football is a little bit different now. You have people trying to navigate this. That's okay. However, for a team to really achieve something great, then yeah, they have to hold themselves to a very high standard. And this idea of we must win, or I can't look my kids in the eyes. Okay, then we're talking a different thing. We have to win because it's important to my values that we become, that this team is in first place at the end of the season. That's why we have to win this game. That's two different things, and I really I can tell you an example from this. If we zoom into talking about it at the beginning of the season, I sat with them and I said, okay, we were fifth, I think, the year before we took over. I think they were fifth place or even seventh place. They fell pretty far down the ladder, and they had always been kind of up above the top, trying to get promoted. Didn't really work 2 or 3 seasons. And then we came in, and the idea I had at the start was, why don't I suggest to them, that we try to become a top three team to not have as much pressure. So we have a top three team, and after enough games, you're hanging around, and then maybe you can say, "Hey, all right, now we're going to push for the top spot," and then we have a little more go at it. So I was kind of suggesting to the team of us, "Oh, well, where do you guys want to land?" And I was talking about points. I didn't say position, but I just said points. I said, "Okay, the last 5 seasons, this is the amount of points you needed to get first, second, third, fourth, fifth, on average the last 5 seasons. Where do you think we can land? Can we get in the top three? This and that." And the discussion went pretty quickly between the captain and a couple of the elder players. And the captain says, and I won't forget it, he just goes, "We don't have any other goal but to get promoted. So why are we pretending? Why are we pretending? Why would I say I want to be in the top three? I don't want to be in the top three. I don't want to be in the top three." And then one of the eldest players who was there said, "He goes, I don't see the point either. I don't see the point in not saying we want to get the amount of points that should be required for first place." And so we took the average for first place. We said, "Okay, that's going to be our goal. We'll work at that. We have this big elephant of a goal. We're going to put it into pieces, and every single 6 games or so, we'll go ahead and see where we are, what we need." But I was just really impressed with their own motivation to do it, because again, I came from moreover of the theory of, yeah, okay, well, we don't want to focus so much on results, and the thing is, you have the results, but it's not that that has to be the only goals you set. So of course, in the same meeting that I'm referring to, we sat down and I had the forwards sit together, the midfielders, the defenders, and the keepers, and I said, "Write down 2 things you expect from your people, from your group, and 2 things you expect from everybody else." So expectations. What do I expect from the goalkeeper? I expect to make one good. There was like one great save at a game. One great save where you would say, "Oh, that could have been a goal." And then what do I expect? I expect I expect for forwards, classic. I expect the forwards to be just as active in the defense in the 80th minute or 90th minute as in the first. Um,
Yeah.
and so you have process. You absolutely have process, but you have also a very clear identity of where you want to go. And I think as a group, groups and individuals also different. Groups need very clear, strict. This is what we want to achieve. When you start to get a little wishy-washy or kind of uncertain about what's going to happen, it gets without process. Let's say it can be troublesome.
What do you think that clarity actually creates? I mean, what do you notice in these environments that when a group has a clear objective or clear objectives? What do you actually? Are there things that behaviourally you notice or voices that you hear that you feel that these clear objectives that are shared actually create?
Dan, I would say one of the best ways to answer that is, someone will only be as good as you expect them to be. They'll never be better than what you expect them to be in that sense. A good horse jumps as high as it must, as at least they say in Germany. But it's one of these things that it's really showing, and it's been in my 15 years of experience, is one of the things that I've just really seen again and again and again. And clear expectations on a team then also dictate behavior. It dictates behavior all over the place, because if someone is not acting in a way that then would help you achieve what the group has decided is important, it just gives you every single right to then, let's say, motivate that person in a different way. And as someone who says I focus on environment, I would go, every individual I've ever worked with, if they disagree with the value, whatever that goal, if they disagree with those values, well, 2 things will happen. Either they'll be so loud and get so much support that the values will have to adjust, or this person leaves the environment, and then the core that's left over becomes stronger. And so these are things that you kind of you can't sacrifice values. You can't sacrifice your goals. When you start to compromise on those things, you're gonna start to see the beginning of the end really quickly.
The image that I'm envisaging as you speak is somewhat hierarchical. So shared objectives, helps people to shape expectations, and those expectations allows people in that environment to stretch and support, to stretch each other and support each other. That's kind of that kind of hierarchical, right? We have these objectives. That helps us to drive our expectations of ourselves and each other, and subsequently that creates behaviors whereby, communication, whereby we're stretching each other, we're supporting each other as a consequence of those expectations, as a consequence of those objectives. It's just a kind of image I got in my head as you were speaking.
Yeah, no, it fits.
I, I think that's interesting. And well, I mean, on that subject, I wanted to ask you about, because you said structure, you talked about goal setting, recovery, and obviously we're still on this League Four side. And last thing about this was communication. I mean, everything you're speaking to, I suppose, speaks to communication. But were there other, because I just think this probably across all sports, but certainly in European football, soccer, I find this almost to be, hey, look, it's not the last great thing that we need to knock down in terms of improving player competency, but it does suffer and have a hangover of top-down authoritarian leadership, where players don't have the opportunity, or haven't had historically the opportunity, to upskill themselves from a communication perspective. And whenever I've walked into an environment, that's one of the low-hanging fruit I'm trying to search for, is great communication. So I assume that's something that you really emphasized by your own admission from a structural perspective.
Absolutely. Medical department and coach is probably always anyone who says you see him smiling, that is, any club I've ever been to is always going to be one of the biggest, just canyons of there's this one camp talking and another camp talking, and where science suddenly, or let's say the autonomy of a human being suddenly just kind of goes out the window sometimes, and what someone is capable of doing. And again, one of the things even that I've been asked to, of course, is, hey, can't you work with him? Can't you get him? He just keeps complaining about whatever, this injury or this pain. And I think to myself, he's complaining about something hurting. I can't make him wish it go away. I can't. Those are those moments you get asked to kind of, use a magic wand. And it's really just, and communication is hilarious. Sometimes it's, someone's not communicating something. Most of the time, in my opinion, it's more over someone doesn't want to listen to something. And this happens quite often. And so when we have issues, I talk about the fourth, back in the fourth league, it's usually, there's one physio, then there's a guest physio, there's a doctor who comes once a week. If we go to RB Leipzig, we're talking about 2 doctors, 6 physios, 2 rehab coaches, a weekly chiro who comes in, a chiropractor. Then you have 3 assistant coaches, 1 head coach. You have 4. You just, communication is just a whole nother level. And then you have, of course, 3 or 4 liaison officers, I'll call them that at least, that are doing their best as well to try to keep things kind of running as well as they can. And so it's just, the thing is, at a fourth league club, it kind of just gets, it doesn't, not that it gets ignored, the issues, they just don't have the resources really to, and they just have to kind of hope that the communication runs as best as possible. I think when I was in the mix, I was really able to play this glue role between lots of different fractions and really improve communication in the medical department, but also, and like I said, with daily training, even up to, let's say, the higher ups and the management. Sometimes they would, honestly, the coaches would kind of push me through the door and say, hey, Pete, can you go clear this up with them? We just don't really know how to do it. And yeah, I would have to do those things. And so, I'll tell one funny story I can share is we played against Bayern Munich in the German Cup in our second or third game, I guess, of the season, because of the German Cup was like this. And Angelotti was coach for Bayern at the time, and he didn't really speak German very much. He just got there, and his English was okay. Obviously, his Italian and Spanish are much better. and they had no person who spoke fluent English in the whole club except for me. And so they, they asked me to be a translator, and sit next to him at the press conference after the game. And we got
Oh,
walloped like 5-6
fantastic.
nothing. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. But at the end of the day, I shake his hand, hi, sit down next to him, and gets a question in English. Actually, the reporter's mostly speaking, so they ask him something in English, and he tries to answer in English, and it's just broken. It was nothing against him. It was just tough. It's not his first
Yeah,
language, his third or
yeah,
fourth language.
yeah.
I think he articulates himself very well. It was more my nerves trying to listen to him, and he didn't give a short answer. It wasn't one quick little thing like, why did you play the system? It was this long question why he chose this player instead of this player. And I'm sitting there just like that, trying to remember, and I say a few things in German. This is a lot of times what it's like, like talking, communicating from medical departments to coaches or to other parts, is you have this huge, long uh, explanation of what the issue is with the player, and there's multiple people, multiple team, a multidisciplinary team that's looking at all different parts, and then you have to go to one person, the coach, and explain it, but as quickly and as articulately as possible. When the reality is, the coach wants to know one thing: is he fit? Can he train? Can he play on the weekend? That's pretty much those three things. But at the same time, if you leave information out, it can kind of come bite you in the bum later. So these are things that we try to then, of course, be really, really, really clear on. It's very common. It's not nothing that's particular to RB Leipzig, to FC Augsburg, or to Karl Jena. It's going to be everywhere.
And I think you're also speaking to coaching, high performance coaching competence now, in as much as there's far more demands on coaches to be able to speak the language of the medicine, sports
Mm.
science, and sports psychology departments, if you like, if that's a club that has that in place. Just as much, is it as important as tactics? Is it as important as principles of play? Well, maybe it's not quite as important, but it's still darn
Mm.
important, and that is the present of world class coaching in these sports, and the future is the coach has to have the capacity now to be able to be part of that multidisciplinary team, the MDT, rather than sit outside. And I hear what you're saying in terms of, because I've been in this position myself, helping people communicate effectively and be able to take larger chunks and portion them down into to smaller bits of information. Yet at the same time, that's going to be the coaching skill, is to be able to be the head of the organization
Mm.
and accommodate that kind of language from other departments.
Mm. There's something you can say about that is, uh, coaches, they need, with as little words, little communication, little time as possible, to make many people feel as important as possible,
Yes.
as quickly as possible, and at without costing them focus and concentration on, as you said, tactical things or decisions, and their own mental health.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well
some
said.
do it through their kind of aura. Some do it through their, asking questions, the way in which they ask questions, the way in which they pull people in. Uh, each coach I've worked with has had a little bit of their own way of showing how they care about not just players but staff, because these huge staffs, they are just extremely well educated. Many of them are well experienced, and they just need the feeling that what I'm doing is contributing. I need to feel like I'm contributing. It's basic psychology, that I have this feeling of a little bit of autonomy, but also this idea that what I'm doing actually is contributing to the 3 points we're trying to achieve on the weekend. And I've had this talk with management as well. Though I talk to management, it's just as important that management goes through and says, you have all these different people that you've hired. Maybe you didn't hire them, but they're here and they've been for a while. Uh, you gotta pull them in 5 minutes. What's your name? Do you have a wife? Do you have a brother? Do you have a sister? I know that seems silly. I don't need to be too personal. It doesn't always have to be this. I don't have to know who you're married to, who's your first cousin. Uh, but I do need the feeling as a employee of Club X that I'm part of Club X. And we have so many times where we want people to do, um, it's not extra work. It's just that's how football works. You need to be a little bit obsessed. You need a little bit over the top, to really sometimes I don't even say to be effective. I really do. Sometimes you just have to do a little bit more. And humans tend to want to do more, not because of money or anything of that motivation. They tend to want to do more because they feel a belonging. And you know, these are these are basic things in psychology that I get very frustrated with because I feel that they're overlooked. They're overlooked for what we think are simple, quick answers, which seem to make sense in a fast-paced, high society type of community, which is the football bubble. There's no doubt.
People want to do meaningful work, don't they? And
Absolutely.
you got me thinking here because I think it's really interesting. I think that importantly, we're talking more about coach well-being, coach mental health,
Yeah.
and obviously at the very highest level of the game, that head coach or manager, as we might call them in the UK, obviously at the very very highest level, very
Absolutely.
well remunerated, which is something but not everything. Wealth doesn't inoculate you from stress, but we're talking about coach and head coach well-being, and it's absolutely critical. And at the same time, I mean, my experiences at the coalface has been that the very many great head coaches I've worked with, and I've worked with awesome head coaches, at the same time, they can be so passionate about what they're doing that they can tend to want to do it themselves. And they've got so many
Mm,
great resources around them actually to help them to do it, but also to turn down the volume of stress and pressure and workload. So it almost
mm.
feels quite paradoxical at times. It's just like
Yeah,
you've got
yeah.
these people around you who can help you and actually make things easier for you, but you're not always, and probably who have expertise or do have expertise, deeper expertise than the head coach does in various realms. Um, I
Yeah,
think I
yeah.
think it's fascinating, but I'm keen to move on. And you've mentioned Leipzig, and you've already drawn a comparison between that fourth division side and Leipzig. In as much as you walk into Leipzig and you've got 6 physios and 2 doctors and lots and lots of Red Bull Leipzig. It's a big club and well funded and a big European team. Tell me about you walk through the doors, and I'm curious to know about the first few weeks there, and respecting what you can and can't share. But tell me about that. Where did you start there? How did you start? Where does that begin for you, and where did it begin for you?
Yeah, no problem. I think these are if I'm a young practitioner, for example, listening to this, or someone who's studying right now, I think these are the things that I had in my head of that's what I want to do. I want to be the mental trainer of RB
Yeah,
Leipzig. And I was in Leipzig when they were starting to come up through the third, fourth, third, second league, and I thought to myself, that's my dream job to be to be the mental coach for that. And kind of things went, let's say, I actually was asked to interview for the academy position as the sports psych way back when because they had one. And I went through all the interview processes, got whittled down to two of us, and then they chose the other guy. And then I went to Jena, as I said, I worked for there, and then they wanted another psych. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go back. And I got through the same process at the same person said, no, not good to know again. So I went to Augsburg. And then I was in Augsburg, and then I didn't go to apply for the academy. I applied for the professional team. My good friend and colleague, Max Pelke, who was there for 3 years, 3 seasons, had left for Bayern
yeah,
with Julian Nagelsmann. And it was then vacant. As I said at the beginning, Jesse Marsch was coach, was then unfortunately sacked. A really passionate guy. I know that. I don't know him as a coach or as a person. I just know who those who
sure.
talk about him said. Very, very passionate. Leeds, of course, he was very big there. He was. I know he was also quite with a lot of energy. Just a
Yeah,
big energy guy. Um, but yeah, so I ended up getting this chance to apply, and I knock on the door. I show up, get the job, work things out, and then there on the January 28th or so, I think it was there. And Domenico Tedesco had taken over since then, and he had been on a decent winning streak. And I show up on a Thursday, I remember, and it was during the international break, but they wanted me to come start right away. So I came, started, and then I was there, and it was like an easy training. It was a public training. Um, and I'm sitting at the coffee machine before training, and no one's really introduced me. They kind of showed me the medical staff a bit and this and that. I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden, two or three players come in that I clearly can recognize, at least from newspapers and TV. And I'm just kind of like, "Oh, hi there. Oh, this is Pete, the new psycho." Okay. Hey, how's it going, man? And it's this quick shock effect that you kind of got to get over yourself really quickly, and you're like, "Oh yeah, they're expecting me to do something." Like, I think that's very normal for anyone who's in that situation the first time. And I go out, have training. Coach calls me in, says, "Hey, I'm glad that you're here. Have a good start." It was just, I gave the players, I think 4 days off. We're back here on Tuesday, and so I didn't have an apartment. I had a hotel room. I would have been by myself for the weekend. I said, "Okay, thanks," said bye, and then I just took a train back down to Augsburg with my wife and kid. We're still there, and like this was the start, like a half a day of just like a few handshakes, and you think to yourself, did I just do sports psychology? Was I doing, it's a very weird, it's a very surreal experience. And then the next week we played against Bayern in Munich. And it was, I will admit, I remember not knowing where to sit. We fly down. Where do I sit when we fly down? What can I do in the hotel in the night? Like, these are all things that I knew very well from the fourth league. I knew very well third league. I knew how we did it there. I knew how I did it in academy football. At this level, I was like, are things different? Do people act differently? Do they treat you differently? Um, and yeah, sure enough, the first few weeks are just everyone kind of eyeballing you a bit to see what you're doing, what's your first move going to be, who are you going to try to maybe connect with. And so what I basically took as the most, let's say, best path forward was to find people within specifically the medical staff that I said, this will be a good entryway. I will stick around the doctors, the head physios, those who have good relationships with the players. Let them be my lawyer. Let them start to say, okay, I can talk. They can talk to me. It's no problem. And then they sit there and they talk to the player and they say, Pete's not a terrible guy. He's all right. We're talking. He's actually American. A lot of guys didn't know I was American. And so all the foreign players, all of a sudden, they got more a little immediately warmed up to me about, we can speak English. I don't have to speak German. That's great. That's nice. There was the one Croatian player. I speak some Croatian. So then we started chatting a bit. Yeah. So like, those are the things that then get the ball rolling. It starts to kind of go. But the first couple of weeks were very rough. It was just from my head, very rough. I felt very ineffective. I felt like I'm just kind of watching. I'm not doing anything that I would typically like to do. And it's just because they're in the middle of the season and they're on full. They had a really bad start, and now they're kind of getting into the groove. And it's like, hey man, we're in a good way right now. Don't mess this up. Like we got it back on track. We're glad that you're here, but don't mess this up. Um, and so that was the feeling. I just kind of wanted to do my best to wait for my moment. My moment didn't come, if I'm being honest, until we lost the semifinals against Rangers, Glasgow Rangers at Ibrox. We were up 1-0 in the first leg to get into the final, and then we went there. We thought, hey, we're gonna play a solid game. If we tie, we're through. That's all we got to do. And it just kind of, Ibrox took over. One of the most amazing experiences of my life. Loudest crowd. I don't know who's been to Glasgow. I know the Celtic fans. Don't worry, I'll get to you in a second. But Rangers was at that moment in my life. I said, this is the most intense match I've ever been ever. It was just insane. 2 weeks before, I was at Bergamo in Atalanta. That was the most intense match I'd ever been at. And then I was at Ibrox, and I was like, okay, no, this is the most intense I've ever been at. And that's when I was we was like 1 a.m. and the players are getting treated. And this one player, he's laying there and he gets up and he looks at me. You know, he's got like the ring on his face, right? Because he's in the massage thing. He looks at me. He goes, Pete, so you're the new guy here. I'm supposed to know about these things. Why can we not win these big games? He's like, I've been here. We have had some big games, some great opportunities to really feel like we've got that next step. And we just can't do it as a team. You've been watching us for weeks. What's going on? And it was just like the clouds part, and it's like booms. I have my opportunity. One of the most experienced players is asking you for this, and what do I say? Of course, I don't know.
Okay, all right. I shouldn't laugh.
Okay, my answer is a little more articulate. But at that moment, I'm thinking like I have to have the best answer in the. I have to know exactly what the issue is. And so we talked. I'm not going to go into everything we talked about. The specific issue, but one of the
Can you
things.
skirt around and give us a broad brush treatment of what you might have said?
So yeah, no, I will. So we had this we had the cup final coming up, the German Cup final, and
Okay.
I had said the great thing is, okay, we're not going to go to the Euro final. Was very disappointing. However, we have a couple games left to qualify for Champions League, which was really much in question that season, and we have the German Cup final coming up because we had already qualified ourselves. And I said, well, the greatest thing is this season you have at least one more great chance at this. That's the coolest thing. So you already
Yeah.
had the experience with this specific team to try it again. I remember saying that. The second thing I said was, I think what this team, it's a young team, a young club. It doesn't try to focus on its experiences as much. Instead, what it tries to do is just always want more, and just hope that if we just keep wanting more and keep pushing and be aggressive, what's going to happen is we're going to get to such a level that we're just going to take over, and it's just going to happen by itself. And I don't think championships come that way. I told him that. I said I don't think that's how it works. I think the moment if we are able to reflect on both the great experience, the positives, but if we are really also able to look at the pain that we've had and the things that you guys have suffered, I think you're going to be able to be more prepared and stable, and what I always say is flexible, more mentally flexible in the final. And sure enough, what I did, I can tell you what we did then is we had a couple more games, great experience. We had last minute, 90-minute goal, and an away game in Bielefeld, just crazy fans, small stadium.
Right.
And what ends up happening is we qualify for Champions League and we have a week for the final. And I go to the media department and say, I have a great idea. I go, I want like an A1 size poster. I don't know if A1 is because I'm about this big of every single. I want one picture from each game since the new coaching staff came. So Tedesco had been there for midway season, a little more than midway in the season, and we had the EuroLeague games and we had the DFB Pokal, the German Cup games. And so what I did is there was an entranceway the players had to kind of come in, and they had Corona still at the time, so they had to go in through one entrance, and then they would walk through the gym, a long pathway all the way into the locker room. And so what I ended up doing was having these big pictures printed out, one from each match, where I felt that picture really demonstrated what that match kind of represented. And it was this huge long tunnel on the right and left side of all these big pictures and just really emotional pictures from each thing. And at the very, very, very end, in very typical sports psychology side, I had the DFB Pokal, the German Cup ones, and then a blank one. This experience has not yet been done. So we had the wins, the losses, the tie, all this pain, all this good stuff, and the cup things, and they had to go through all of them. And one of the funniest things about it is, I did all this kind of behind the scenes, didn't tell anybody, just set it up. The players showed up the day before we're supposed to drive, get on the bus to Berlin, and they go through it and see all this. And they're all critical looking around. They had no idea who did it. They didn't know until after the cup, actually. And I wasn't sure how they felt about it. I thought, maybe they think it's cool, maybe whatever. And they did is they got back, and almost every single picture was gone. They just took them with them because they had like, that's my memory. I want that. I want that from the season. Oh, I want that from the season.
Love it.
And the thing is, they had just won the German Cup. They had qualified for Champions League after a ridiculously stressful season. And what they held on to the most, in my opinion, was this picture. That memory. That's me in this. I love that. I want that in my apartment. And a lot of these guys, they even have these pictures hanging up in their apartment to this day, which reminds them of that season. And so the long answer to that question of what I told him was, we need to focus on our memories. We need to learn from memories. We need to let both the positive energy and the pain teach us. When it needs to come, teach us. It needs to leave. Can't hold on to it. But I feel like we ignore half the picture, and that's costing us big games. And so that very, 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 very cool. That was the first German Cup, and that was a really, really amazing, positive experience. A couple weeks later.
So you're heavily invested, again, back to this notion of you being heavily invested in the environment. It's making me think of the emotional and social climate within that environment. You're impacting the emotion across the team, and it's, as you talk about memory, past experiences, as you were speaking there, it's making me think of being at the sports psych that I am. I immediately think of Albert Bandura and confidence and self-efficacy, collective efficacy, and drawing on past experiences. So you're doing that, but not just learning through positive experiences, but also, the pain of negative ones as well. So there's a dynamic there. But this notion of emotion as well, Bandura talks about, emotion is going to influence the efficacy that you experience, and so you're drawing on memory to drive emotion. I like that. It's just this. Whenever I'm in an environment like you're speaking about, I'm always trying to detect the emotional and social contagion. How does this feel here? It's not so much how, if the walls could talk, what would they tell you, which I think is kind of important, because you want to think about the cognitive side, what's being articulated, what the plans are, what the processes, what the goals are, etc., which we spoke about earlier, but also how does this feel? And so, little things like you did there, where you sort of intervened and made a difference. To me, what I'm hearing is that I would describe it as really driving the emotional and social contagion in the group, across the team, at the training ground, and so on and so forth. No question, Peter, just a sort of a thought back at you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think the environment, it lives and dies from emotions. It lives and dies from values, from the emotions of the people that are there, and the players, whether they want to be or not, they're the centerpiece. And although I can never force somebody to feel an emotion, I absolutely can do my best to trigger and try to steer a certain thought process.
A couple more questions before we close today, just about the specifics at Leipzig, and again, respecting what you can and can't share. But so much of our work now, and for quite some years now in sports psychology, we've talked about the importance of working with and through coaches. Is that something that was, you mentioned that the head coach, when you first arrived at the training ground, when you started at Leipzig, was probably shook your hand and said, I'm delighted that you're here. You've said that was what he said. So did you get to work with and through the coaches much?
Absolutely. I think it was two different styles. So let's say there's technically three different coaches at my time in Leipzig.
Okay.
At the end, it was Scholt Löw that was basically interim. He took over for the last 6 matches, I believe it was, in the semi in the German Cup semifinals, and they were all very distinct. Him, Marco Rose, and Domenico Tedesco, very distinct individuals, very effective individuals, very bright individuals. I can say that about all three of them. I think, I'll put it this way. So Domenico, for example, was someone who had his two very close assistant coaches, and I would very much work with them So I wouldn't work so much with Domenico directly. I would absolutely communicate. We say hi on the pitch. How's it going? Um, very, very, very well structured individual. If I can give him one of the biggest compliments for him is just a massively well structured, very punctual individual with these types of things, which you don't always get in football. Um, and so for example, when I talk about losing at the semis, well, we had also lost an away game at Gladbach the day before. And one of the things that I did
Mm.
then is on the plane ride home is I was on my computer and I called one of the assistant coaches over and I said, hey, I have an idea. I think this could be really important for the players, and I'd like to kind of build it up, use this, and build up to the last three matches of the season, plus I think it was two matches of the seasons, and plus the third game um, would be the cup final. And I said, these are the mental steps I think that would make sense. And he took it. He said, hey, thanks, Pete. Really cool idea. Thanks. And at that moment, you kind of think to yourself, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. And then the next week, we're sitting in Monday or Tuesday, we're sitting there, and it's about how we're going to go into the week. And you see the 2, 3 slides that I had showed him are then presented to the players about what I think are the mental steps to get to the final, how we're going to go through this. And even a couple of players maybe jokingly coming up to me afterwards and being like, I think that was I think there was a little influence there. I kind of laugh and I was like, nah, not me. Um, but players, they'll sniff some things out. But in general,
Yeah.
that was him. So that was I have my assistant coaches. I think I want to focus on the players as much as possible. Marco. Marco is just kind of we call like a people catcher in German. They refer to it as a people catcher. He's just energy pure in the room. Comes in, he's a bit uh, someone that just tries to involve everybody and their expertise,
Yeah.
and shoves them often in front of groups when he feels that it's their job to do so. So hey, this is you go and do this. So I had to become much more of come out of my shell a little bit more with Marco. Marco expected me to. One of the things he even described it once in an interview. I remember he said to offer a buffet of of things for players. That's how what he wanted me to do, to have all these different ways to connect to players, and basically not be his right hand. I think that would be an exaggeration, but and emotionally, but really to be kind of a barometer of what's going on in the team and say like, hey, there's some big issues going on right now that I need to know about. Without, again, he was always very discreet. He was very good about, I don't need to know names. I don't need to know this. I just want to know, are there issues with the staff, with the the things that I might need to address. And Scholt, the last one, he wanted ideas. He wanted, hey, I want to know what you think we can tell the boys on the weekend. How can we sell then this match? Hey, what about and he'd come maybe with his own idea. Say, I saw this video. I thought that was cool. Can you turn this into a pre-match speech, something like that? And these are ways that you're not, maybe, again, I'm not maybe doing things directly to the players, but the
Mm.
coaches are very much keen to listening to your feedback, what's going on in the environment. And this is one of those things that, again, it's kind of at what level you are. For me, I was always someone that I saw myself as, and I do to this day, I work basically for the coach. I'm not part of the coaching staff, but the coach, the club, and the players I work for, that's my main those are the main people who are benefiting from me, and that's where the trust, and that's where the rubber hits the road, I believe would be a very good American Detroit phrase.
Last question. How do you manage player concern for confidentiality?
This is such a classic. I think I think my answer to this question is simply authenticity. I don't really know another way around it. I get this with young practitioners a lot. You can tell a player what you say is just stays between you two, and you can go both directions completely. You can completely lie and go and tell anyone you want, or you can completely take it to your grave. um, I think spending time when you're in a club, so we're talking about working actually in a club right now, it's different than being an external. I think external, you have a little bit more of a, advantage with confidentiality. Within a club, you live from your reputation, and so consistency in your reputation and acting consistently, acting calmly, and showing your authenticity day in and day out. That's going to really buy you a lot of trust, and that just comes with time. And that's one of the things that the longer you can stay in a club and prove it again and again and again, it tends to just get stronger.
Brilliant, brilliant. What's next for you?
It's great. That's the next question. I think right now I have the idea to take a small break and then maybe kind of start my own consulting firm, just working with individuals or teams that maybe knock on the door and say hey, we'd like to use your experience. We'd like you to consult with us for a short time. That's something that I would be very interested in. I've had two clubs kind of knock on the door and just see if I would be interested in one in the foreign country, one within Germany, and I just it's difficult right now. I feel like it's something that I'm not sure which direction I want to go. I think if the right people call, the right people seem the harmony seems to mix. The last thing I would want to do though is to jump in a situation where I feel the club, for example, if it was a club that they're not convinced, they just simply want somebody, um, but maybe not everybody wants it. So I think what's next for me is I'm open to calls, you could say in that. But at the same point in time, I do have a direction of um, how I want to kind of maybe start as an individual business here in Leipzig, at least to start.
So how can people, with all that in mind, how can people find you, follow you, and potentially get in touch?
LinkedIn is going to be your best weapon, no doubt. If you don't have LinkedIn, my email, I'm not sure if there's a way to include it. That's probably good. The website is not up yet.
What's your email address?
Peter J. Schneider, 85@gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, Peter, I can't thank you enough for today. It's really interesting your experiences at Leipzig, and I'm sure you will have tapped the interest of everybody listening. And so thank you so much for today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Dan.
Well, everybody, I really enjoyed that episode, and I'd love to hear what you, the listener, think. So please do get in touch via X or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the show. And if you do have any suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.